Hello and welcome to World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Anna Jabłońska. Our main focus tonight is Ukraine's incursion into the Russian region of Kursk. We will also be discussing how Poland will be strengthening its position on the NATO eastern flank with new arms deals. That and much more coming up in just a minute, but first let's look at tonight's headlines. Independent Russian media report that Russia has asked thousands of its citizens to evacuate from Kursk. Patriot launchers will be manufactured in Poland to help strengthen the NATO eastern flank. And the Polish government is looking into the controversies surrounding the funding of the country's Olympic authorities. And we start with our main topic. Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region has now entered its 7th day. Now joining us live from Kiev with the latest is our correspondent Oskar G. Good evening, Oz. So what is the situation like on the front lines today?
Well, that's right, Anna, but for the last 7 days, there has been little coming out of Moscow or Kyiv to let us really be able to tell you what's happening, besides what you're able to see on social media from videos posted from various different places. Now, today we do have word out of both Moscow and Kyiv to give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on. The two numbers that should be important are 28 and 1,000. 28 settlements. That's the number given to Putin today in an address from the local governors, the local regional authorities, telling Putin just how many settlements the Ukrainians currently control. According to Moscow, that is 28 settlements. Now, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, General Syrsky, has also given a number to Zelensky today, at 1,000 kilometers squared. So according to the Ukrainians, they currently control 1,000 kilometers squared of territory in the Kursk region of Russia. Now, Zelensky spoke in his nightly address today, again acknowledging Kursk, this time by name, but also acknowledging what happened 24 years ago at the start of Putin's reign in Russia, the Kursk submarine disaster. Today, Zelensky referencing that disaster, saying, it is clear what is the end for Putin, and talking about Kursk today, what's going on. So it looks like from Kyiv that they are digging in Kursk, and they have no intention of making this a short raid in which they're planning to leave. It looks like they are planning to occupy territory. This is still speculation. We don't know that for certain, but we have heard credible reports that Ukrainian forces are not trying to take much more territory in sweeping offensives like they have been over the last few days, but are digging in and building trenches and reinforcing their position and bringing in artillery for ranged attack on Russian positions. So it looks like Ukraine is digging in. We still don't know what the objectives of this offensive are, but we do know that the Russians are struggling to stop the Ukrainians, struggling to push them out, and the Ukrainians are taking that advantage with both hands and are trying to dig in for the long haul. We don't know how long that's going to be, but for now, Ukraine is firmly stuck in to the Kursk Oblast. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Oz, very much. And for sure, that move surprised Russia and Putin, and we'll see how it will develop. Oz, thank you very much for your live report. Stay safe and take care. Now, military experts say Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region has exposed the myth of Russian military invincibility, both at home and abroad, and may prompt Western backers to relax limits placed on use of their weapons. President Putin is attempting to cast the advance as a bid to grab Russian territory, possibly in a move to divert attention from the military embarrassment unfolding on his watch.
Ukrainian soldiers film themselves raising their flag in a Russian village amid the incursion into the Kursk region. An unthinkable sight just a few weeks ago. Moscow's forces are for a 7th day involved in intense battles against Kyiv's largest advance into Russian territory since the start of the war. It left southwestern parts of Russia vulnerable before reinforcements started arriving.
Everyone has seen that they are totally surprised, that they are really caught off guard. No one really knows what to do, either to give up their positions there in the region, or to wait for another troops to come, or what to do, where to run, what to do, what to say.
Russian broadcasters say 76,000 have been evacuated from areas bordering Ukraine. Some media suggest Ukrainian forces are now up to 30 kilometers inside Russia. President Zelensky said over the summer some 2,000 strikes have been launched from the region. Military experts say the incursion has silenced these attacks.
And now it's quiet, completely quiet. I think this is the point why Ukraine army starting the road, the attack of the right to the Kursk.
Russia has released footage it says shows attacks on Ukrainian military vehicles. The regional governor told President Vladimir Putin that 28 settlements now lay in Ukrainian hands.
Ukrainian troops are there on the ground, on the soil. And do we see any real apocalyptic reaction from Russia? No, absolutely nothing. Even their most radical officials, they even don't mention the usage of nuclear weaponry.
Experts say the limited response to the border crossing breaches one of Putin's red lines and could embolden Western governments.
I think that our Western partners will really make lessons of this story and will lift whatever limits are left about the usage of their weaponry.
But why now? Putin said that Ukraine was trying to improve its negotiating position for the future. Donald Trump's former US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has said that there was no evidence the former president would abandon Ukraine. At the same time, he proposed massively boosting military spending for Ukraine. Analysts have also suggested that with Joe Biden retiring from the presidential race, the US under his guard has relaxed the brakes on Kyiv's military.
U.S. government very long time that they say no. You can not using the weapons for attack the Russian position in Russia.
Experts say Kyiv will be looking to see whether the morale-boosting move relieves Russian pressure on its eastern front.
Ukrainian businesses are making their mark in Poland. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, an increasing number of Ukrainian brands have established themselves in the country, 60,000 to be exact.
Meet Orest. He played a key role in bringing the Ukrainian brand Lviv Croissant to the Polish market, and it hasn't been without challenges.
Our main office is located in Ukraine. You never know what will happen tomorrow. One of our main food suppliers was attacked by Russian hackers, and we couldn't make any online delivery for this location.
Currently, the chain operates in 6 cities across Poland, and they plan on expanding far beyond. And Lviv Croissant is just one example of a broader trend. There is a significant rise in Ukrainian food chains entering the Polish market. Brands like Good Morning Coffee and Milk Bar, both well established in Kyiv and loved by Ukrainian customers, are also making their presence felt. There are several reasons for this trend. Experts point to Poland as an obvious choice due to the large Ukrainian diaspora and the promising potential of the Polish market.
And you have consistently 3-4% plus growth year after year after year, and that's been going on for about 10 years now or so. That's hard to find really anywhere globally. So if you're sitting in Ukraine and you're a country at war, you have had your economy fall by 30%. You've had historically a successful business within Ukraine, and now you can move next door into a country.
Many Ukrainians are also choosing to start their businesses in Poland from scratch. According to the latest data, Ukrainian enterprises established in the first half of 2024 are primarily in construction, information and communications, and services. These numbers speak for themselves. In the first half of 2024, Ukrainians established more than 1 in 10 new businesses in Poland. Furthermore, 77% of all new businesses registered by foreigners in Poland were Ukrainian-owned.
2 Polish soldiers were on board a United Nations patrol vehicle which was hit in an airstrike in southern Lebanon. Neither the Polish soldiers nor the accompanying Irish troops sustained any injuries.
A 2-vehicle patrol was hit in a missile attack of unknown origin in a southern Lebanese village close to the border with Israel. 8 soldiers had found themselves under fire.
The military patrol vehicle of the Irish and Polish soldiers, which was conducting a patrol, it was in a range of the attack. Thankfully, none of the soldiers was injured, and they safely returned to the base.
A force of 250 Polish soldiers is stationed in the south of the country as part of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, also known by its acronym UNIFIL, which is a UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon. For now, the Polish soldiers have been mostly responsible for monitoring the area. Should a full-scale war break out, they might see a rain of missiles flying over their heads and other perils.
For example, soldiers on missions under the auspices of the UN could be captured and used as hostages by one of the warring parties. Here, I would think that this could be done by a terrorist organization rather than by the IDF.
The exchange of cross-border fire between Iran-allied Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Israel has been triggered by the war in Gaza, which broke out in October last year. Hezbollah, whose military wing is widely considered a terrorist group, is thus showing its solidarity with the Palestinians to the discontent of some Lebanese residents who are afraid of being affected by the fighting.
It is a militia. It is not the army. We support the army. We support the law. We support the constitution. We are a hostage in our own country, which is not normal.
The region is also an important sphere of influence. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is starting his 3-day visit to Moscow, during which he'll meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin for talks about the situation in the Middle East.
Following the atrocities of World War II, the international community decided that civilians' lives need to be protected better during war. 75 years ago today, an agreement was made known as the Geneva Convention.
30,000 civilian casualties worldwide in 2023, up by more than 70% from the previous year. This reflects the current state of compliance with international humanitarian law by countries at war.
The number of civilians that were killed in Gaza is unprecedented. You have more civilians killed in Gaza than the civilians killed after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine in more than 2 years.
The high number of civilian casualties has not only been fueled by the conflict in Gaza. The war in Sudan and the ongoing Russian war in Ukraine were two other major sources. Nearly 11,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since 2022.
The committee was deeply concerned about the grave human rights violations committed during the ongoing armed conflict by the Russian Federation's military forces and private military companies against those protected under the convention.
There hasn't been any case of a country that would directly claim that they don't want to follow it. But in practice, because I still think that the prestige of the Geneva Convention is quite high, and I think it is correctly understood as a great achievement of our international community. But in practice, we see more examples of let's say detraction from the Geneva Convention.
Following the atrocities of the Second World War, 1949 marked a breakthrough in thinking about the protection of human life. The Geneva Convention defined the basic rights of prisoners of war, civilians, and military personnel. But its relevance has since faded. It is also difficult to bring those accused of war crimes to justice. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has evaded justice despite an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court for his role in the forced deportation of children from Ukraine.
Polish athletes have returned home from the Paris Olympic Games, and they brought back 10 medals with them. This triumphant return does not come without its share of controversies, however. The Polish Prime Minister recently questioned the financial input into Polish athletics and pointed out the discrepancies concerning the money involved.
This meeting comes at a time of controversy, as the Polish athletic world's finances are being questioned. At a press conference last Friday, the Polish PM shared concerns about how Polish sport associations are handling funds.
I would very much like to reveal all of these signals that Polish sport has become some sort of way for politicians and activists to earn a lot of money.
According to the Polish Ministry of Sport and Tourism, some 472 million zloty was spent to prepare Polish athletes for their performance at the Olympics. The head of the Polish Olympic Committee addressed the Prime Minister's concerns yesterday.
This is normal sponsorship and not money from the state budget. This is money from companies which give us it in exchange for the necessary marketing tasks.
The Polish Minister of Sport and Tourism took to X to reassure the Polish world of sport that his ministry is looking into the issues that have come to light during the Olympic Games.
We will investigate every case of neglect reported by our athletes. There were too many signals about the lack of presence of coaches, physiotherapists, or lack of equipment. We begin with establishing who was present at the Olympic Games and in what capacity they were there, because this was funded by public funds.
It is clear that those who suffered the most due to the discrepancies are the athletes themselves.
I did the best I could with what I had during the preparations. Despite the dire outlook of our situation, despite having to pay for the grouping out of pocket in February, despite not having information about financing till April, despite not having bikes, we had nothing. We received our suits the day before the beginning.
Here's what other athletes and officials had to say on the matter when asked about it after their meeting today.
We need to talk and look into it internally within the associations as to why such issues exist. I don't know what problems other sports have, but I do know what we're dealing with and what we will have to face to be able to develop.
I, for example, belong to those athletes who praise the help they got from their associations when it comes to achieving an Olympic medal.
The Polish Minister of Sport and Tourism has asked for the case to be treated as a priority and for any relevant information to be relayed to his ministry before August 14th.
Let's return to our main topic. Ukraine's forces ramped through the Russian border 7 days ago and swept across some western parts of Russia's Kursk region. Now the offensive continues, and President Zelensky has said that the push is a fair response to attacks launched from the Kursk region toward Ukraine over the summer. Now joining me to talk about the situation in Ukraine is Frank Ladwich, a military expert and a senior fellow at the University of Portsmouth. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Anya.
So, independent Russian media, of course, we have to, be careful what we're reading, but they're reporting that Russia evacuates 180,000 from Kursk region, as Ukraine is set to take 28 towns. Now, do you believe that this may be a turning point in the war?
It's wise, of course, to evacuate these people because that area is going to become a combat zone over the next few months, perhaps even the next few weeks, at quite a large scale. When you speak of 28 towns, I think really we're talking here about villages and settlements. So far, the Ukrainians have taken, it seems, around 300 square kilometers. It's quite a significant incursion, mirroring, I suppose, the Russian assault towards Kharkiv, which we saw about 3 months ago. But is this a turning point? I don't think so. Is it a major incident? Absolutely it is. It's very significant for a number of reasons. Primarily, I think, the change of narrative in the war. This, I think, was the first objective of this operation. It was to make us talk about it and give encouragement to Ukraine's supporters. But I'd also like to point out, or rather to reinforce a point made bizarrely by President Putin, who said that there's one strategic objective of this, and I think this is true, is for Ukraine to take land with which it can lever its objectives in any eventual peace settlement. And as we know, the next peace conference is going to be in November. It seems that President Zelensky will invite the Russians to this. So there are a number of strategic objectives to this, aside from the obvious military advantages that seem to be accruing to the Ukrainians right now.
When it comes to peace, it seems that there's leverage now when it comes to peace talks. But I'm going to ask you about the peace in just a second, but I want to ask you about Russia's reaction to this. Were they taken by surprise? Were they not? Because it seems that the front line, I mean, they disrupted some of the front lines for Russia, and there is chaos. What is your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. This was it's a military disaster for the Russians. They were taken completely by surprise. In fact, it's almost worse than that, because I think it's fairly credible, one particularly credible account of why the Ukrainians chose this area, which was Sumy in Ukraine across to Kursk Oblast in Russia, was that the Russians were themselves planning an incursion into Sumy. Certainly there were 2 or 3 months ago. And one of the initiators for this, it is said by some commentators, was the Russians clearing mines and defensive material from the border to facilitate that in the next sort of cycle of operations. And what happened was, it seems the Ukrainians got the jump on them and preempted. Now, whether that's true or not, does
for those who are not
significant.
Who are not really experts but are interested in the matter, what does the situation say about Russia's military? Because for years they were, called invincible, the biggest military, the strongest, some would say. What does it say about them now, as we see what's happening on the front line?
Well, they're clearly not everything they were cracked up to be. But let's not assume that this is the end of the matter. So far, the Ukrainian forces have not received significant opposition. I think they've been contained by screening forces the Russians have sent. It seems that the FSB have been put in charge of this operation as an internal security operation. That's a cosmetic issue. But look, what we don't need to forget and absolutely need to centre is that the key fighting in this war is not taking place in Kursk. That's it's cosmetic to some extent. That's important. It's for narrative. Key fighting is, and the centre of gravity is in the south. And every day the Russian army is making progress in the south. And it is conceivable that another objective for the Ukrainians was to draw Russian forces from the south. I don't think that's going to happen. The Russians do not lack for manpower. The Russians, to a far greater extent, do. The Ukrainians, to a far greater extent, do lack for manpower. And it may well be that this is something of a gamble on the part of the Ukrainians. It's a high-risk gamble. It may pay off, it may not. I'd also finally say one thing, that this is the first invasion of Russia by Ukrainian forces or any army since 1945. And I would caution anyone who believes that invading Russia is always a strategically good idea. But look, nonetheless, we are where we are, and it's looking good right now. Let's see how things fold out in the next weeks or months.
Well, exactly. And some say that, Ukraine has nothing to lose. And it is surprising that such a small country went for Russia. Now, we also know that Belgorod region is also being evacuated. So as we said, Ukraine is making progress. But how is this going to continue? I mean, is Ukraine able to prevail and actually, take more land from Russia? Which direction is this going?
I don't think they're going to be taking significant chunks of Russia. I don't think that's their objective. They do not want to get beyond their logistical chains. I suspect now this operation in terms of territory is culminated. The Belgorod issue is essentially a broadening of the front. So they've spread I think their influence, if you like, the military influence, the grey zone, into Belgorod Oblast. But I don't see them taking huge amounts of land, and certainly they won't get near Kursk, for the very good reason, even if they're not resisted at all, and they will be formidably, that they don't want to outrun their logistical chain and be cut off, as has happened before. But look, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, this is looking good for the Ukrainians. If they make the right decisions, this could be a very significant operation.
Well, that is right. It's a very interesting case right now, and unfortunately we have to end it here. But we should talk about the peace talks, whether this is going to have a leverage on these talks. Frank, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Anya. Pleasure.
And thank you for watching World News Tonight. Stay with us for more news and comments.